And so what we see happen in this passage is we see a conflict begin. Joseph has a dream. His brothers don't like the dream. Joseph tells them another dream. They don't like that. They decide to eliminate him and get rid of him. But this is what's amazing about this family. Now, you already know how this story ends. You know that Joseph saves the lives of his brothers in the future, and he forgives them for what they did. He forgives his brothers. But when their father Jacob dies, the brothers, they get scared that Joseph will change his mind and try to get revenge. They know that they haven't deserved the forgiveness and the kindness that Joseph has given them. And so the thing we need to understand about forgiveness is you can't earn it, right? They sold him into slavery. They tried to get rid of him. And instead of, when his father died, instead of like casting judgment and getting revenge and throwing them into prison, Joseph decides to forgive his brothers. And there's nothing that they could have done to have earned that forgiveness. How many times in our families could we be justified in responding in revenge or a negative way? But instead, if we forgive them, we can move forward and God can do something really cool. And so you see, God was working on Joseph's heart. Joseph had a heart of forgiveness, and he was willing to forgive his brothers for all the horrible things that they had done to him, regardless of the fact that they could never repay him for that. And so you say, okay, I get that. Not so typical families, they forgive each other. But what does that mean to me? What is the story of Joseph and his brothers? What does that mean to me? How does that change my life? And the truth is here, we have sinned. We have done awful things that have separated us from the love of Jesus. But he, just like Joseph, is willing to forgive us, is willing to welcome us with open arms, regardless of what it is that we have done. There's nothing that we can do. There's nothing that we can say. There's not a checklist of things in order for us to earn Christ's forgiveness. We simply just ask and he does. We simply just ask and then he forgives. There's no amount of money for you to buy his forgiveness. There's no amount of work that you can do to earn it. Just like Joseph, his brothers, they knew they couldn't earn it. But Joseph chose to forgive them, just like Jesus will choose to forgive you if you ask of him. Atypical families, they forgive each other. And how do they forgive each other? A few ways is one, they admit that they've been hurt. They admit that they've been hurt. Just like Joseph told his brothers, hey, I remember what you have done. And then they talk to God and they say, God, I need help forgiving them. I need help forgiving them. And then they ask God to heal them. God, I need you to heal me in this. I want to go into this with a clear mind. And then they choose to focus on moving forward instead of moving back. They choose to focus on the new instead of the old. Joseph chose to focus on his new relationship with his brothers instead of all the awful things they had done to him. Jesus chooses to focus on you being made new instead of all the horrible things that you have done to separate yourself from his love. Forgiving yourself and asking for forgiveness. Forgive yourself. If you need to, forgive yourself for the part that you played in it. Maybe Joseph had to have a moment where he said, you know what, I was pretty arrogant in that time. Maybe I had a moment where I realized, you know what, I need to make my heart right. Think about right now a family member that you know you need to contact and you know that you need to forgive. Now imagine how you and your family could be transformed if you were willing to choose forgiveness over bitterness or revenge. Forgiveness changes our attitude. It changes our perspective. It changes the person that we're fighting with. Forgiveness changes our entire family pattern. It changes the behavior in the long term. Forgiveness is contagious. And so I want you to think about this. As we study being an atypical family, how can God change your family? And what is he wanting to do in your life in order for your family to be more in line with his will? Like Adam and Eve, Not so typical families can be used by God. God can use your family. Like Abraham and Lot, not so typical families pray for one another. Be a family that prays for each other. Like Jacob and Esau, not so typical families have tough conversations. They deal with their problems. They don't hide them or shove them under the table. They deal with them. And last but not least, like Joseph and his brothers, atypical families forgive one another. So teenager, if you don't hear anything, if you've not watched a single video, I want you to hear this. Don't be typical. Don't be typical. Don't respond how the world expects you to respond. Don't be okay with, just getting by. Allow yourself to pray, have tough conversations, and to forgive those who you have conflict with. And what we see when we do that is we see true healing. We see true healing and we see relationships restored. Someone does something that absolutely just devastates you. It'll never be whole again, but it can be. Because if we pray for one another, if we have tough conversations, and if we forgive one another, and we choose to do those three things, God can radically change your family, and there's no limit to what He is capable of doing with you. Don't be typical.